immersion program in general. Okay, so no matter what, these are major goals of the DLI program. First, that the students have high levels of bilingual proficiency. So both Spanish and English, obviously in this case, and you all know that. That you strive for biliteracy, and I guess Teresa, when she introduced this session, she mentioned, okay, we have to make sure that they are bilingual and biliterate. Content area achievement at or above grade level, because we know the research shows, all of the research shows that when you implement a dual language program, that the student, if implemented effectively and correctly, the student should reach above, well, on level or above grade level in all of their content areas, okay? So the dual language program here is meant to be an enrichment type model, not remedial, okay? Enrichment model, that means your students then, the expectation for your students is that they are at the very minimum on grade level, but we want to see them surpass their counterparts, not because we're ignoring the other kids, but because the actual simulation, the academic simulation and the cognitive simulation of the student is at that level. They are learning in 2 languages, okay? So you have to always think about your program as an enrichment type model, okay?
And we still have some students that they struggle.
You're right.
The native Spanish speakers,
You're right.
It's challenging for
Yes.
them to learn, so you
Yes.
can't, that's what you want, but sometimes it's not.
Okay, and that's why we're going to look at systems, right? That's what today is for. That's what we're going to look at systems, because of course this is over time, right? So we have to look at systems, and we have to look at what are the gaps in the systems that may keep them from doing that. So we have to provide the best environment for them instructionally and academically as possible, and then, we'll talk about strugglers, because there will be. But we have to make sure that we're providing the best linguistic environment for them to achieve that, right? So we have to teach at that level, not at this level. Multicultural competency, so that has to go along with the bilingual, biliteracy, and bicultural awareness as well. Here are some critical components. The program consists of instruction through 2 strictly separated languages. Okay, 2 strictly separated. That is why you all talk to me about the separation of languages, in this case by day. By day, and in some of your cases by teacher. Okay? Has to be strictly separated. For a 2-way program, both native English speakers and native speakers of the target language are participants. So your L1 and your L2, your native language and your second language. We talked about the difference between 2-way and 1-way there. Okay, it is an additive environment. So we have 2 types of bilingual programs, and you have to know dual language is a type of a bilingual program, right?
Yes.
Okay, we have 2 types of bilingual programs. There's transitional, and then we have dual language. You all are the dual language group, right? A dual language program is additive. Subtractive would mean, well, does anybody know additive versus subtractive? Okay, can you share? What is your understanding of additive versus subtractive?
An additive program is a program that embraces both languages equally.
Mm-hmm.
When it's a subtractive program is when you use the target language and you do not take care of the language that is brought from home.
Right. Okay. So we see that a lot with like early exit type programs, things like that. So additive, meaning in the end you want them to be biliterate. We want them to hone their skills in both English and Spanish. We do not want to take away from either language. On the contrary, we want them to have an additional language. Cooperative learning is used to optimize student interactions among native and non-native speakers. Now, this is critical, especially for you all who are in the two-way group, that they have the cooperative learning. because they're simply not going to get the language opportunities from anywhere else except for in your classroom, unless their parents are truly dedicating, 4 o'clock to 8 or 9 o'clock and all the weekends for them to be immersed in an environment where they're going to be hearing a lot of, in this case, Spanish, right? So I'm talking about the native English kiddos who don't have the opportunity to hear Spanish anywhere else unless it is given to them at home through other means. Their only opportunities are going to be in your classroom. So think about the implications instructionally for what that means. If I walk into your classroom, or anybody, okay, and your students are in silence and not cooperating with one another, and you don't give them those structured opportunities, where are they going to learn or have the opportunity to hear, speak, read, and write Spanish? Nowhere. Okay? So this is absolutely critical. Okay, and then again, high academic expectations for your students. The schools are committed to equality, multicultural understanding, and value of both languages. And I believe in both campuses and also from the district level, you all have that component met. The teachers possess native or native-like ability in the languages of instruction, the native or native-like, right, ability in languages of instruction, high level of content knowledge, instructional strategies, and classroom management skills. And why do you think one of the components of a strong DLI program is that you possess native or native-like abilities in these languages?
Because not all children come from Mexico, or, they could be different dialects within the Spanish. And if you're native, you will be able to tell the differences. There's Puerto Rico, there's Venezuela, there's Cuba, there's...
Okay. Yeah.
So you might be discussing a banana, like we were talking earlier, the watermelon, and they know it as something else. So.
Okay. Yeah, so sensitivity to different dialects and different regional differences for Spanish. Okay, good. What else?
What's the modeling? Yes. You've got to be able to model correct pronunciation and correct vocabulary, sentence structure, and all that.
Especially for the students who don't have any, we call it being an effective language model, and especially for the students who don't have an effective language model at their homes. I'm thinking particularly for the English native speakers who may go home to an all-English atmosphere and they may not have any other model. So they're just learning it from you and from the students, from their colleagues, right?
In Spanish, we see that also, a lot of patterns of speech that are not correct in their native language. So there's a lot of corrections in their own language, and it's not just the English that they are learning. Actually, when they learn the English, the model that they are using is a lot more, I would say, academically correct than what they learn in Spanish at home.
Also, with the new state initiative, that we have to now make sure that teachers are not just fluent speakers in the language of instruction, and that is a requirement now. So any new teachers who are hired are going to have to prove their listening, speaking, reading, and writing abilities, and the state provides some tests for that, but not all. So we have to actually test that they are fluent academically in especially their productive language, so that they are models. That is, I think, key to having the two-way program, because I can absolutely hire a person who is beautifully fluent in Spanish and not have to worry about that teacher's fluency in English as much as we had to before, because before you had to make sure the teacher was perfectly equal in both, and we all know how almost impossible that is. So the state has provided that law now, and 2A is a wonderful opportunity to make sure we're meeting that model. So, and I know some people don't know all the new state laws, but that came down last year in several of our meetings.
Any other thoughts? Okay. So definitely for all of those reasons, it's really important. So, we have to constantly be keeping up with that too, our linguistic abilities, right?
Annie, and I want to add something to the content. As Nora said, depending on our regional dialects, because I'm not a Mexican born, I was born here, but raised in Venezuela, so I have a very different dialect. My content-specific vocabulary is a little bit different from what is in Mexico.
Sure.
So what I have done in the past, and I'm not saying that that's the right way to do it, but that's the way it has worked for me, is that I study the text and see how Texas calls things. For example, for me, an array in Spanish will be un arreglo, but Texas calls it a matriz. So we have to study those differences. So we know that we're teaching the correct academic vocabulary to the kids and not using our regional expertise in the case.
I think it's excellent that is that's your basis, that you start with the text. We're going to talk a little bit about that when we talk about vocabulary a little bit later, but that is certainly a good place to start because that's the terminology that they're going to start seeing on their standardized tests. We can debate all day long about whether that's the correct one, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's not what they're going to see on the test. However, part of making sure that they are culturally sensitive and culturally aware and adding to their strengths in that way means that we do share with them as well. Okay, but you might go to Venezuela and it might be arreglo. And you might go here and it might be nave. And you might go over here. And they need to know that because they're not always going to be surrounded by people who are like them. Right? So I think it's very important to make sure that any information that you can share with them vocabulary-wise is important because they'll read newspapers, they'll watch TV, they'll meet people along the way, they'll go into the workforce, and they'll meet a variety of people. So
What we really need to do is make them learners.
Yes, good.
And want to know that there's differences before we find them.
Well, that's it.
And I always tell them, my husband's from Venezuela, so a lot of my vocabulary has kind of shifted from studying the books, like probably we all have Spanish, and this is mesa, table, that sort of thing.
Sure.
And so I was like, okay, if I'm talking Venezuelan, just let me know if you don't understand what I'm saying, because like we talked about, for watermelon is patilla in Venezuela, well, patilla are the sideburns, and you don't want to eat that. So anyway, and it's funny to them, and I think it's a funny way to learn about another culture. And I said, oh, I'm speaking like a Venezuelan, just let me know. Absolutely. I think it's important for them to see different parts of the world, even if they can't go there.
I agree, and as we said a moment ago back, a characteristic of a strong DLI program is that they have multicultural competencies. Okay.
And on top of that, we have to be aware of the textbooks, because textbooks are not always aligned. So we have to be very careful with the vocabulary in textbooks.
Absolutely, and it's the same argument. You might see it one way here, you might hear it one way there. The idea is that they know across the board what it's referring to. Okay, now let's talk about the observations that I did.